Your dreams are bigger, bolder, and more badass than the life you're living now, but something just keeps getting in the way. Join certified coach and former therapist Diane Wingert for the Driven Woman podcast. She'll show you how to get rid of whatever is holding you back so you can stop spinning your wheels and up-level your life. Get ready to hop in and buckle up. This is the Driven Woman podcast, and we're heading for the fast lane.
Well, hey there, Driven Woman, and welcome back to the podcast. You know, I believe that the world has never needed its creatives more than it does right now. I also think there's never been a better time to start a business as a creative. That being said, I know the path is not easy. You see, the most creative and gifted people often struggle with self-doubt, self-criticism, perfectionism, and rejection sensitivity. So it can be a true challenge to embrace your creative identity and begin to share your gifts with the world. I was planning on releasing this client success story episode with my client Lauren Hirsch about 4 to 6 weeks from now, but it's really been on my heart to speak to the creative people in this audience, so I decided to release it sooner. If you're a creative who's having trouble leaning in, believing in yourself, and sharing your gifts with the world, this episode is a gift for you. Now, there is a mic drop moment I don't want you to miss, and I also don't want to spoil it, so I'm not going to tell you what it is, but it literally took my breath away and made me so proud to know this beautiful young woman, my client, Lauren Hirsch. Without further delay, here we go. So the last time we got together like this was back in March. After working together for 3 months, I have not seen you in, what is it now? Let me count on my fingers. April, May, June, 3 months. So we have some catching up to do. But first, let me say welcome to the podcast, and thank you for agreeing to join me this way.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So the first thing that happens when I reach out to a client and say, do you feel ready to do a client success story podcast episode with me, is almost all of them say, oh, I don't know if I would call myself a success. And I'm pretty sure you said the same thing.
Yes.
And I think that's just because you might be a little bit modest. The way I remember it, you showed up from the very beginning of our relationship like a total A student. You always did your homework. You asked for extra homework. You made really good use of the Voxer app to ask me questions in between our coaching calls. You showed up very prepared, very appropriate. You listened to the recordings of our calls. And I always tell my clients they have the freedom to show up for this relationship in the way that suits them best. Some people just come to the coaching calls, they get their needs met. Some people like to do homework. Some people like to engage with me in between. Some people like all of that. It's not for me to decide, but I have to tell you, it was really a pleasure to work with you, Lauren, because you took it seriously. In fact, one of the things that I was most curious about is a lot of people hire a coach impulsively. And I went, well, let's face it, we do a lot of things impulsively, right? And that's one of the things we're going to talk about. But a lot of people hire a coach impulsively. And I try for that not to be the case with me, because if we do something impulsively, we don't really know why we're there. We often don't have the best outcome. But you were like going through a process. You were on the hunt. You were meeting with people. You were interviewing people. And I think, tell me if I'm wrong, you might have even hired somebody for one session before you found me. Did I get that right?
Yeah. So I probably talked to 4 people, kind of a variety of, coach, combo, therapist, psychiatrist, and picked one, had my first session and heard you on a podcast and was like, I need to work with her. Like, I am with the wrong person. So immediately reached out to you and was just like thrilled to hear from you that you could take me and that you wanted to work together.
I think this speaks really to the fact that each of us who has something to offer in the world, whatever our gifts may be, there are people that are just right for us. And we need to speak loudly and clearly in the language they most want to hear. Same thing is for you with your art, because your art, and we're going to get into exactly what that is, it's kind of quirky. It's kind of different, like probably your grandmother won't like it, or maybe your best friend won't. I happen to love it. And I think, it's one of the things, and we'll get into this more, but one of the things I think we owe to ourselves as gifted, creative, neurodivergent people is to be really clear on who we are and what we have to offer, and to unapologetically share that with the world. I kind of feel like that's my mission more than anything else. And it was really exciting to see that that was exactly what you wanted as well.
Yes, it's exactly what I needed and when I needed it.
So you said that you were looking for possibly a therapist, possibly a coach. What do you think the biggest struggles were at that time that you really wanted to figure out?
I knew something was going on. I had been diagnosed with depression in college, had kind of seen therapists, and just like something was missing. So finally figured out I was diagnosed with ADHD. And, just talking to the nurse practitioner that diagnosed me, it was like so eye-opening as to like, I'm not broken. Like, there's a reason I'm like this. Like, all of these weird, quirky things that I do, like, suddenly make sense. And so I think it was just gave me a lot of determination to take this and like use it to my advantage, instead of being a victim of it. Cause I finally figured out like kind of what made me feel so out of sync with everybody else. So it was just worth like the investment of time, the investment of money to like get it right, because I knew I wouldn't want to do it more than once.
That's a really good point, Lauren, because one of the things I say I hate most of all is wasting my time and wasting other people's time, which is why I go to the trouble of thoroughly interviewing every single person before I invite them to work with me, because I'm not right for everybody. Everybody's not right for me. I don't want to waste their time. I don't want to waste my time. And I think particularly in the world of ADHD, there is a plethora of people right now who literally found out they had ADHD 5 minutes ago. And the next thing you know, they're marketing themselves as an ADHD coach. And it's like, ooh, that's what we used to call blind leading the blind. I don't know if that's an expression that's used as much anymore. I do understand the enthusiasm. I really do. And I do understand the desire to help other people figure things out. But I'll say this publicly, just because you have ADHD doesn't mean you're an expert on it. In fact, I don't even consider myself an expert on it, because there's always more that can be learned. But I think in your case, that was really just the beginning of the story. You knew that you had ADHD, and you knew that that explained a lot of your differences and why you often felt out of sync. I think it also explains a lot about why you eventually became depressed, because for how long can we live feeling totally out of alignment with everything and everyone around us before we don't end up depressed? That's my experience, how most people end up. But what I recall about working with you that was most profound for me is that it was obvious that you were highly and are highly creative, but strangely from my perspective, you didn't really identify as a creative. It was like, oh, this is just kind of a thing I do like in my spare time. But everything you do in a creative way. So that was something that I really was captivated by, because it was like uncovering your gifts and getting you to want to open them and play with them and embrace them and think, actually, this is kind of cool. One of the things that I found the most enjoyable, the most rewarding, the most fascinating about our work together was that it was so obvious what a creative person you are. Everything you do in a creative way. And yet, for some reason, you didn't initially identify yourself as a creative. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And I think a lot
Yeah.
of that had to do more with how creativity was sort of thought of in your family and growing up, that's, being creative is just, that's not like work. That's just goofing around, right?
That, and I think you also showed me that, creativity is an identity. It's not a behavior. It's like a way of seeing the world and being in the world. And that's not really something I had ever considered before. I thought because I wasn't actively making art that I couldn't identify as a creative person.
Where do you think we get these notions? Because you're not the only person who's ever said this to me. And honestly, I have said this to myself. Two of my three kids are highly creative, and I see what they do as creativity, and I see them as being creative. But it wasn't until just a few years ago that I began to identify myself as a creative because I had limited ideas about what being a creative is. Like, you have to be a painter, or you have to be a sculptor, or you have to be, I don't know. And since I was not those things, you're not a creative.
Yes. I think some of it has to do with how we, I guess, take what we think other people think of something and put it on ourselves. And we so easily fall into imposter syndrome. It just kind of snowballs.
Yep. I think the only people that don't actually have imposter syndrome are actually imposters, because everybody else I know has it. Like, I mean, it's really funny how all these things sort of cluster together. Like, if you are a gifted person, and again, schools are identifying people as gifted and talented. So it could be because you have a really high IQ. It could be because you have really high emotional intelligence. It could be because you have artistic ability or musical ability or sports ability. But you came into this world with above average abilities in a specific area. And yet, I've never met a gifted person who sees themselves as gifted. They always focus on what they think they're not good at. And you were exactly the same.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think you had a hard time with your inner critic. You had a hard time with self-doubt. Where I think your perfectionism came in, Lauren, is that you wanted to do it right. You didn't want to make mistakes. And that not wanting to make mistakes, I mean, we're smiling and nodding our heads now. Of course, nobody listening to the podcast will be able to see that. But, I've learned how to make light of it, but it's actually quite painful, isn't it?
Yes. You kind of just end up doing nothing or burning yourself out. I think, you helping me sort of create structures and parameters to kind of guide, like, the way I do things helped me also see that in what I was doing as well. Easier to let go of those things.
I think most of us, I mean, let's face it, all human beings, not just brains like ours, all human beings learn what to do by observing others. We are a social type of creature. We don't raise ourselves. We are raised by others of our kind. And we have mirror neurons in our brains for the specific reason that we learn who we are by seeing ourselves in the eyes of others. This is a beautiful thing because it is the foundation of connection, of relating, of attachment, of love, of friendship, of all those wonderful things that separate us from other creatures. But when you're different than the others, when you're neurodivergent, you have any other kind of difference, if you only look to see who you are in the eyes of others, you won't always see something reflected back that is accurate for you. So I think fundamentally, creatives have a harder time with self-identity, with self-acceptance, and with really understanding who they are, because most of the time, we can only get partial information through our interactions with others. Most of it, we have to go within. And that feels like very uncharted, possibly scary territory.
Yeah, because you haven't trusted yourself for so long. And that, I think, is part of perfectionism. You're looking to do it the best to the standard because you don't trust yourself to determine that.
Can I just tell you how glad I am that you are the one who brought up the not trusting yourself? Because it means you understood the assignment, Lauren. You got your A plus. I did not have to bribe you, prompt you, put something in the chat function to make sure you said it. This is really, I think, for a gifted, creative person like yourself who is struggling with identity, purpose, significance. Like, who am I? Why the frick am I here? And what am I supposed to do with this one beautiful human life? And before there were so many options, it was pretty easy. Like 100 years ago, people would just follow in the footsteps of their family. You know, the son followed in the father's footsteps, who followed in his father's footsteps, and so forth. Same thing with women. Now, it would appear at least that we have unlimited options. And for creative, gifted people, that is excruciating.
Yes.
Because you combine that with the impulsivity and you literally want to do everything and try. One of the terms we talked about during our 3 months coaching together was being multi-passionate and multi-potentialate. And while that may sound super groovy to people who do not have that as part of their makeup, it can actually feel like a genuine burden, because the more potential you have, the more gifts you have, and the more things you're interested in doing, the harder it is to focus, to choose, to eliminate second guessing and self-doubt, and to stay the course until success is achieved. And I think that more than anything was a huge part of the work we did together, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Like creating that consistency, I think, helped clear out a lot of noise in my head of like, I could do this, I could do that. Like, I want to do this thing. And you end up not doing anything, and then you feel bad, and that doesn't make you want to do anything. And it's just kind of this cycle. And really the thought of like picking is so overwhelming, but once you do it, it's kind of a relief, and knowing you can always pick something else, knowing it doesn't have to be the only thing, and that there isn't one thing. It's about the consistency and like the effort behind the thing that you're picking.
And it's the thing you're picking for now. So some of the things that I remember with a lot of affection and humor is we would go through my process of how to kind of narrow down, because let's face it, we're both really good at starting, not so good at finishing. So there's like the spare bedroom, the closet, the garage, the storage space of all of the projects that were begun with all good intentions, but somewhere along the line, they fizzled out, or we hopped into another project, promising ourselves, I'll get back to you. Only 10 additional projects later, we're not getting back to shit. So I remember we were talking about narrowing down, and you're not giving up anything. You're not throwing anything away. You're not burning the boats. You're not saying, never, I'll never go back. But we're not going to get anywhere if we don't consistently apply effort in a single direction. And I remember that you loved that in theory, but in practice, it was like, so is it okay if I get rid of all those other things? I'm like, why do you need to do that? Well, because obviously, if I don't, I might be tempted to, deviate from the agreement. Like, if I still have those things lying around, I might just wander back to them. And you would
that, and if I decide not to do this for now, that means I'll never do it ever again, because I'm picking this one thing.
Yes.
So I have to go all in.
And that's funny. I love the expression all in. But when you have this kind of multi-potentialate nature, when you are a gifted creative person and you have so many things that attract you, that you genuinely enjoy, that you want to get your creative hands around, is it so bad that you don't finish most of them? Because I think there's a little bit of nuance here. And I think it's why I like working with really smart people so much, really smart people who have a lot of abilities, because wouldn't it be easier if you could just say, all right, you're only going to do one thing at a time and you have to do it until it's done. You cannot deviate from this. This is the plan. Well, what it would mean is you'd have a really hard time deciding what that thing was and be like, I choose nothing, because, you can't decide, because it makes the consequences of not finishing so great. But what our agreement was, what if you have now entered the shame-free zone where this is an experiment and we're going to agree that you are going to limit yourself to one thing for a period of time, simply so that you can see what that feels like, what goes on in your mind as resistance to that, what workarounds we can create that help you move through that, and whether there's something of value after the experiment is over. Now, we haven't seen each other for 3 months. I'm kind of dying to know. We gave you a lot of tools, a lot of habits. You were very keen to get them to the letter. How many times a week for this and and it's like you wanted so hard for me to tell you exactly what to do.
Yes.
And what did I always say? I will do no such thing.
Yes.
So
always the suggestion, the answer about the answer. It was really good because it forced me to think about it, get myself there, and it's the teach a man to fish.
It usually people think I'm playing with them, or it's like, just tell me. But the truth is, because you have so much potential, because you are so creative, because you are so brilliant and your mind works in such a unique way, you are an idea fountain. It is a fountain that will never run dry. It will serve you every day of your life. If I were to tell you, do this, don't do that, instead of teaching you how to think about this fountain of creativity that you generate, you would either become hopelessly dependent on me or make no progress in trusting yourself, which was really for me, you trusting yourself was my assignment. That was what I signed up for, to mentor that, to guide you in that, to support you in that, because someone who has so much potential is always going to struggle with trusting themselves, making decisions, and second guessing the decisions they make. Hey, it's Diane with a quick interruption to the episode because I've got a couple questions I just need to ask you. 1, are you where you want to be in your business? Are you making the money you want to make, working the hours you want to work, seeing the clients that you want to see, and getting the income and impact that you went into business to get? And if the answer is no, what's holding you back? Why is there a gap between where you are and where you want to be? Do you know the answer? In my experience working with female solopreneurs, so many of them don't even really know what's standing in their way, and that is so frustrating. So I created a little quiz called What's Holding You Back? There's a link to it in the show notes. If this is you, please take the quiz. And if you do, DM me on Instagram at Coach Diane Wingert and let me know your results. Now, on the other hand, if you already know what's holding you back, if you already know what the obstacles are that are getting in your way from achieving the income and impact that you deserve and desire, then I don't want you to take the quiz. Forget about the quiz. Go directly to the other link in the show notes and book a consult with me. I may be the very coach, and this may be the year that you put all of that behind you and really have the business that you went into business to have. For everybody else, keep on listening. And if you find value in what you hear, don't forget to leave me a rating and review on Apple or wherever you're listening. Here we go. Back to the show.
Well, one thing that you helped give me insight on is how sensitive I am. And because I'm an empath, being in traffic and loud noises throughout the day, just getting to homes, that alone was really draining. And now working from home, it's like I'm able to conserve that energy and working with the parents to really teach them kind of concepts and bigger things that have a bigger impact. Because one thing that you also mentioned was because I was working so much, I didn't have time to do the things that were meaningful to me. And that included learning, getting into the grind. You kind of just like, okay, well, I'm just going to do instead of really stepping back and looking at more strategic ways to have, a longer term plan.
Those kind of questions, I think, also kind of stop your typical train of thinking and make you reassess from a different angle your thought pattern. I think that's always a good thing.
Do you have an example of that? Can you think of something specific?
I think for me, I try to apply it with not being so hard on myself, I guess, and, trying to maybe look at what I have done versus what I haven't done. Just flipping the script a little bit. I don't do it with as much humor and like on the nose as you do, but I do it in your spirit.
I have been at this a little longer than you have, my young friend. Grasshopper. Because just consider this. I have decades more experience beating myself up and feeling shame for being just like you. So if I can shorten your learning curve, so much the better. Yeah, to be able to genuinely laugh at yourself and to see yourself with grace and forgiveness and humor, that takes time. But if that's the direction you're headed in, I'm doing a victory dance over here. One of the things I was thinking about is how you were taking a course and you were also preparing yourself to join some sort of a group. What we had talked about is we worked together one-on-one for 12 weeks. And you knew by week 9 or 10, you started to get a little anxious about then what? And most of my clients do. I don't see anybody racing to the end of the 12 weeks and then going, see ya. They're usually like, oh crap, like this is life. This is life changing. Now am I just going to jump off a cliff?
Is there an encore?
That's what I've been working on. With a small interruption for my relocation. But it's such a good point because I think behavior change is hard. And we were not really just looking at changing your behavior. We were looking at changing your identity. Because otherwise, the behavior has to have something, a context. Otherwise, it's always situational and circumstantial. If you're saying, I just want to have a consistent, we worked a lot on habits. I want to have a consistent practice of exercise and mindfulness. I want to have a consistent creative practice. I want to work on starting a little business of some sort, even if I don't launch it for a while. I want to work on this. I want to work on that. Well, that's all good and fine. That's like the never ending list of things we want to do and things we want to start. And I did not want that to be like 20 more projects that you would begin with me and not end. So, because that's our nature, right? So the goal is, how can I create consistency and flexibility?
Yes.
Because nothing is 100% sustainable given the unpredictability of life itself. And right around the time we were finishing up, you knew you had the self-awareness to know if I'm going to sustain and maintain these things, I need to be part of a container. I need to be part of some sort of group process that will allow me some accountability, some support, some guidance so that I can continue these things. And you wanted to continue your creative practice. You wanted to continue learning and skill building and surface pattern design. And I think you got some benefit from that, but you've recently made a change in that area as well. Is that right?
Yes.
So I guess we should probably dial back to at the end of our 12 weeks together in February. Within a very short time after that, everything in your life changed.
Yes. Pretty much the next day. A relationship I had been in for 2.5 years, like first person I lived with, first person I could see myself being with long term, ended things, and the next day left. And I was sort of like left living in our house together for 2 months. And then a couple weeks later, I got a new job and then had to start a new job, wrap up the old one. So pretty much every sort of habit and consistent structure that you and I had worked on together was pulled out from under me pretty quickly.
And I think that's just the nature of life itself. And I think the thing that we need to be really honest with ourselves, with our clients, if we're a coach or therapist or consultant, helper of any kind, is shit's going to happen. I actually did another episode of the podcast about this recently, because shit does happen. It will happen. And it's probably something that we need to kind of factor into our plans. And I remember you reached out to me at that time, and we agreed to do a one-off session, which I only do with people that I've already worked with. But you had some really important decisions to make. And I think with all of the change you were experiencing, you just didn't want to make it on your own. We're now fast forwarded.
I was so sad with all of the disruption, but I also knew that I would never have been better prepared to handle all of it. And the only reason I was able to get the job I got was because I did see myself as a creative. I think that really affected my mindset going into the interview process and the job application process. So those things were a huge help. And then, holding on to as much of those morning and evening routines, just those small slivers of sanity, and kind of working with, okay, I can't max out all of the routines, but I'm going to do as much as I can today. And I'm going to call that a win.
So even though your life was literally a hell in a handbasket at that point, I mean, changing jobs, even when it's your decision, hugely disruptive because you don't know if it's going to work out or not. Moving as a result of a breakup in a significant relationship, one that, I remember our conversations, you were really thinking, this is a person I could see myself with long term. So the potential there for your life to be completely upended and for you to go into a spin of bad choices, inability to make any choices at all, sort of like going with the whole victim mentality, none of that happened. You were sad, you were struggling, but you reached out for support, and it wasn't even ongoing support. We met for 1 hour. You just needed to be reminded of what you already knew and that everything you were doing was in alignment with all we had worked on. You had been frustrated in the job that you were in because it did not give you growth opportunity. It also didn't give you the opportunity to really leverage and tap into your creativity on enough levels. So you were really interested in a position where you could do more of that, but also a job that wasn't going to suck the living, suck everything out of you so that you wouldn't have the time, energy, or bandwidth to work on your own creative projects on the side. And this is, I think, the challenge for a lot of creative people. It's like, well, I think ultimately you came to see yourself as a creative. You came to see yourself as gifted. And you also came to see yourself as entrepreneurial. That being said, it's like those projects, you're setting it aside. You're not giving it up. That mindset shift meant I'm still entrepreneurial, even if I choose to get another job. You don't have anything to prove by, in the midst of all this change, loss, and disruption, to go all in on your entrepreneurial side and start a business in the midst of looking for a new apartment and going through the trauma of a breakup. And I think sometimes people feel like, because I work with entrepreneurial women, that that's the only good outcome from working with me, is that they start their own business. I don't know that the timing was right for you to start your own business then.
I definitely don't think it was or is. And I think for me, what's been really cool looking back and kind of looking at where I am now is, you and I had talked about the goal of, okay, I want to make my living as a creative. That was the goal. And now I'm doing that. Like, my job is creative, and I still have that goal of sort of creative entrepreneur, but because you and I work to create this sort of working on mindset and habit at the same time, seeing myself as a creative, practicing as a creative. Now my goal for the creative work specifically has changed. It's not, okay, I want to build this collection. Right now I'm focusing on making things out of just joy and enjoyment. I found that, like, with learning so much at work, adjusting, moving, I was exhausted. And I thought, I know I need to work on this creative stuff. It's not really what I want to be working on, but I have this creative desire. And I trusted myself to say, okay, I don't have to do this thing just because Diane and I agreed that this is what I was going to work on creatively. The point is to do the work, to do the creative work. So trusting myself to pursue a new direction and be flexible with that, and trust that, like, that I'm working on, what I'm learning in my new job, like, all of those things are going to come together for this eventual creative entrepreneurial goal that I might not even have a vision, a super clear vision for yet, but I know that I'm working towards that.
You seem so much more grounded now, Lauren, because it's almost like you've settled into an identity that you really weren't certain about before. And I couldn't convince you to accept yourself. You had to make that decision. I sent the invitation. You had to open the envelope and read it, right? You had to say, I am a creative. I am a gifted creative. I have an entrepreneurial mindset. And I trust myself and accept myself enough to know that this might not be the right time. When unexpected events happen, you couldn't have predicted. And now you're in a new position that, by the way, when you are in a new role that is tapping into your creativity a lot, and you're doing a lot of new learning, that eats up most of your bandwidth. It's also probably scratching that creative itch so that maybe you don't feel as much longing to express that in your free time. And that's totally okay. I mean, do you have to have a creative business to be entrepreneurial? You may not be aware of this term, intrapreneur, but these are the people who bring their entrepreneurial spirit, their entrepreneurial tendencies, their entrepreneurial mindset and outlook to the company they work for, because it drives innovation, it drives risk-taking, it drives new opportunities and tapping into things that probably nobody else would have thought of. And here you are saying, hey guys, have you ever thought about this? Jaw drop. No, actually we haven't. But now that you mention it, we should do that. You know what? I'd be happy to spearhead that.
It's really cool you say that, because I think the best part of the company I work with now is they're so open and encouraging to that sort of attitude, and they trust you in your area of expertise.
It seems like you landed there at just the right time for you, because I'm just picturing back when we first met in November 2021 and how you thought about all of this then. I mean, there's no way to know, Lauren. We're kind of time traveling here, but I'm just remembering how you were when I first met you and how you are now. Could you imagine if you had had the opportunity to work in this same company back then? Would you have been able to take advantage of them encouraging you and trusting you when you were not yet trusting yourself?
No.
What do you think you would have done if they would have said, hey, people, we really, we hire creative people. We really want you to bring your A game. So if you have new ideas, like bring it.
I think I'd be doing a lot of crowdsourcing of opinions and, calling up people I've worked with that are creatives, say, can I show you this first? But, now knowing that they trust my eye and my experience and I trust myself, it still feels risky. It's still scary, but I feel more confident, I guess, backing myself up because I understand it and I'm not judgmental about it.
And it can't all be good.
Right.
I mean, nobody does stellar work every single time. No writer, no painter, no jewelry maker, no textile worker, no actor, songwriter, poet, sculptor. Nobody produces gold on every try. Nobody.
I even got some feedback in the moment about my communication at work because, not to make it sound like everything's the best every day.
It would be okay if you did, by the way. I think you could use some experience with bragging, just saying.
They're very thoughtful about effective communication. And so, my boss gave me some feedback about how I wrote an email and suggested a different way for me to write it. And I think in the past, that kind of rejection sensitivity, mistrust of myself might have sent myself spiraling. But, it was almost appreciated that like he gave me that sort of candor in the moment and trusted that I would know what to do with. So I didn't think I would have ever been able to take feedback like that before.
That's huge to be able to take. Maybe we even when it's given in the most supportive way possible, criticism is criticism. And most creative people recoil from that. Some of the work we did was around dealing with rejection as a creative. So being able to recognize that when someone gives you critical feedback, they are trusting that you are mature enough to handle it, that you actually care about the quality of what you do, so that you would welcome that feedback about how you could do it better, and that they don't have to point out to you what to do next, that you are able to. It's actually a compliment, but it shows me how much you've grown in the last few months that you see it that way.
Thank you.
Huge win. So before we wrap up for now, what do you think is next for you? What are you looking forward to, let's say, in the next few months of your life, both personally and professionally?
Professionally, I am excited to continue to kind of learn and grow in my new role, develop mastery there. And then personal life, potentially a relocation, but have started working on a little series of collages. So my Instagram might move from surface pattern design to my journey collaging with security envelopes. But definitely going to keep making things, keep working on some type of body of work and just continue to figure out, what my artistic voice looks like and gain what I can from all of the resources and work towards putting those puzzle pieces together.
I love that you're referring to it as your body of work. I'm hearing a deep respect and acceptance and appreciation of the fact that when you're a creative, the medium may evolve, but ultimately what you're seeking is impact, significance, and self-expression. And that's not going anywhere. That is who you are now. And you know who you are.
Yep.
And that's why this is a client success story. So
can't thank you enough for our time working together.
You made it very, very worthwhile. Trust me.
Sometimes you think that things are too good to be true, but this exceeded expectations.
Well, you brought your A game in every way, not just because you did all the possible work that you could do, but because you were earnest, you were self-aware, and you had a deep willingness to trust the process and grow. And I think that's one of the things I only see in truly gifted people, which is why I choose to work with them. Not everybody is compelled to be on a path of continuous personal evolution, but you are. And I don't think it's a choice. I don't think you have a choice. It is who you are. It's who you were made to be. I think you got depressed because you didn't know how to follow that path. But I absolutely see you finding your way. And you have to keep reaching out on Voxer because I don't know shit about making art from security envelopes. I dare say it could be a new trend, but
I definitely will. You will not stop hearing from me. I'm always looking for that little light in the dark.
Thank you for being here. And I can't wait to share your story with the other people who love hearing things like this. So thanks again, Lauren.
Thanks, Diane.
You've been listening to the Driven Woman podcast with Diane Wingert. Want more straight talk and strategy each week that will take you from spinning to winning? Don't forget to hit subscribe in your podcast player so you won't miss a single episode. Then head on over to the Driven Woman free and private Facebook group community. See you there.